Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one with the 4-game NBA slate for today on Draftkings. Not my most favorite slate in the world, but it's a slate nonetheless, so we're going to be breaking it down. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out, really appreciate it. And also follow me on Twitter, at Pennell16. And if you're in this spreadsheet, I build every single night for the NBA season. I update it all the way up until lock, my cheat sheet, Discord chat, my projections, defense versus position chart. Links will be description below for my Patreon. And without further ado, let's get into today's slate. So up top, we have James Harden, and I know we all played him last night, but that's because Russell Westbrook was out, and it was an elite matchup versus Atlanta. He absolutely crushed, had 81 fantasy points, kind of took the third quarter off. I put a poll up if he was going to hit 100 points. I think most of you said no, but I honestly thought he was going to after the half because he was at 53 at the end of halftime. But yeah, Harden, I'm personally going to pass today versus OKC. It's a much tougher matchup. They play really slow. And I honestly prefer Russell Westbrook, so I don't really see a reason to play James Harden on this slate, and we don't have much value either. So going to be passing on James Harden. Karl-Anthony Towns, I can't assume he'll play anytime soon, so going to pass on Karl-Anthony Towns, obviously. But my favorite spend up is Andre Drummond here at 10,200. I think he's a fantastic play, and I absolutely love him tonight versus Cleveland. And I liked him a couple nights ago, and I don't see why that would change here again versus Cleveland. They played each other 2 nights in a row. Got about a couple of days of rest here. It's January 9th, so yeah, 2 days, or I guess a day of rest. But he should absolutely smash Cleveland. They have nobody that can contend with him down low. Tristan Thompson's a little bit undersized against Drummond. Kevin Love, not a good defender. And then whatever backup, John Henson, whatever. They're not going to be able to contend with Andre Drummond here at a 2020 game versus them last time, 61 fantasy points. Now, I will say his price came up a little bit, but he was honestly underpriced in the 9K range. He should always be above 10K with his upside. So I'm still interested despite the little bit of a price hike, but like I said, no one's going to be able to stop him down low. They're the second worst defensive team for fantasy points given up this season. They're ranked 24th versus centers. And Drummond's 1.41 points per minute this season, about a 25% usage rate. Nothing not to like here about Andre Drummond. If you can afford him, definitely like him versus Cleveland. I would not be surprised if he had another 2020 game versus them. And Hassan Whiteside, I guess he's okay in GPPs. I don't think anyone's going to play him at all because I think everyone's going to flock to Andre Drummond and everyone's going to flock to Russell Westbrook. So I don't think you're going to be able to fit in 3 studs in this slate. So he'll definitely be under-owned, but he's got pretty much the same upside as Andre Drummond, and it's also a pretty good matchup versus Minnesota. They're kind of mid-pack versus centers. I guess Gorgie Dang's not the worst defensive center in the world. But, he's at 1.35 points per minute. I mean, his numbers are really similar to Andre Drummond. And he's shown 60-plus point upside multiple times this season. He's playing mid-30s minutes. I mean, earlier in the season, he was at 28 minutes per game. Now he's over 30 easily. He's getting over 30 minutes a game now, and he's at 1.35 points per minute. The guy's got 20-20 upside as well. It's a really fast-paced matchup versus Minnesota. They are first in pace of play. So, I mean, I like Hassan Whiteside. I don't necessarily think I'm going to go there myself because I feel like I just want to play Drummond. But, Whiteside, he's going to be at probably even more than half the ownership, and on a small slate, if you want to get different, you could definitely go with Hassan Whiteside and just hope Drummond kind of sucks, or that Whiteside's within 5 points of him, and he's about 1,000 cheaper. So Whiteside, I think he's a pretty solid GPP play, but Drummond's the better cash play. Simmons, no thank you. Lillard's fine, but just give me Westbrook here at 8,400. I love this spot for Russell Westbrook, and the first thing that just really stood out to me is he is just mispriced here. There's no reason he should be below 10K, or not 10K, below 9K. He should be below 10K, but shouldn't be below 9K. And this is the cheapest he's actually been since November 22nd. And the big thing here is we get the revenge narrative against his old team, Oklahoma City. And it's also in Oklahoma City instead of Houston, so it's even better for us if we're going with the old revenge narrative here. So he will be extra juiced for this game, and he has also had a rest day yesterday, so he's going to be extra rested, so should be good to go. And on the season, he's at 1.32 points per minute. He's got a 33% usage rate, and it's also the highest total in the slate. I think it's at 226 total, and it's also the late game, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so you have the late night hammer with Russell Westbrook. I expect this game to be pretty highly owned. There's a lot of good plays in it, so if you're doing good early and you don't have any exposure to this game, I would be a little bit concerned here. I'd expect you to fall out a little bit. And they also have the highest implied team total on this slate. He's going to play as many minutes as he can handle. I like Russell Westbrook a lot, going against his old team in his old city. So Russell Westbrook, one of my favorite plays on the slate. Pretty sure he's going to be the cover photo of this video. Absolutely love Russell Westbrook. I would expect him to be one of, if not the highest owned player on this slate. And scrolling down a little bit, Kevin Love's in a good matchup versus Detroit. $7,700 though, you're pushing it a little bit for me with Kevin Love. I kind of like it when he's in the low 7K range. He had a good game versus Detroit last time though. He had 36 minutes, 9 boards, 30 points, 49 fantasy points. I don't hate him. And Detroit's bottom 5 versus power forwards. I think they're like 26th versus the position, or 27th, or maybe even. I think it's 27th. I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I know it's a really good matchup for Kevin Love. He's been over a point per minute this season, one of the highest usage rates on the team. I like that. A really good game versus Detroit last time. He's fine. I don't mind it. More of a GPP play because I just think there's better point per dollar options on the slate. But again, if you want to get different on a 4-game slate to win a GPP, you could go with Kevin Love. I don't mind it. But Clint Capella, I like him a little bit better. He comes in at 7,500, and he straight up smashed last night. Actually, the past 2 games he smashed. He had 30 points and 14 rebounds versus Philly. Then he had the old 22-22 game versus Atlanta last night in 36 minutes, 58 fantasy points. Had an absolutely monster game. And, I mean, he's shown upside like this a lot this season. There was a stretch where he was at 45, 50 points for every single game in a row, for a week straight. But like King Capella here. Now, OKC is pretty solid defensively, but they do struggle a little bit with big man. They rank 15th versus center, so they're a little bit vulnerable down low. And this is the highest over on the slate, and the Rockets have the highest implied team total on the slate, so it makes sense that we get exposure here. He's at 1.17 points per minute in this season. No, I don't think he's going to get 60 points again like he has been, but I think he's a safe bet for over 40 fantasy points at 7,500, so I don't think he's a bad play. I would prefer him over Kevin Love, but I still think they're both pretty solid options. I just think Clint Capella is the better cash game play. You can also look at Chris Paul just staying in this game at 7,400. Like I said, you got the highest over-under on the slate here, and it's a really nice pace-up spot for the Thunder here because Houston is 3rd in pace-up play while OKC is 26th, so you get a massive pace-up spot here. And technically, this is a revenge game for Chris Paul because he was on the Rockets for a very brief stint, so not the biggest revenge game in the world, but still a revenge game nonetheless. And but the dude's been showing some upside recently. He had a really good game last time out, although I will say it took him till the 4th quarter or so to actually get there. He was struggling quite a bit. I mean, I think he had 4 points at the end of the 1st quarter, then I think he had 10 at the end of the 2nd, and he just really brought it on in the 4th quarter. He single-handedly brought that team back in the game into overtime. And it's a good matchup versus Houston. They rank 20th versus the position. Big pace of shot, like I said, and he's got a 22% usage rate in the season, 1.12 points per minute. Now, he's a little bit expensive. I prefer him when he's we caught him a couple times below 7K. 7,400 is not too bad, but he won't grade out as the best point per dollar option, but I still think he's fine given the matchup versus Houston, so don't mind Chris Paul, more of just a mid-range filler play. You could also look at SGA, 7,100. He's a little bit cheaper than Chris Paul, so I could understand if you want to go with SGA instead of Chris Paul. He's pretty much the same player, if that makes any sense. They're close to the same point per minute, about the same percent usage rate. Pretty much get the same matchup here, although he's going to get more run at the shooting guard position, so Houston's actually worse versus shooting guards, and he's also a little bit cheaper. So if you want to go with SGA, I totally understand that. He's a fine mid-range play at 7,100. Matchup is pretty much the same, so I'm not just going to repeat myself a bunch. Andrew Wiggins, he's fine at 7K. I actually liked him a lot in the last game, and he let me down big time, and I mean big time. He only had 24 fantasy points, 15 points, 4 boards, 3 for 8 from deep, 6 for 13 from the field. Just didn't really do too much. But I'm willing to forgive him here and possibly go back to the well versus Portland, one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. It's a really good matchup, and Portland is giving up the 5th most points just overall for fantasy points given up this season. So 5th worst defensive team, and they're 20th versus small forwards. And on the season, Wiggins has a 30% usage rate, 1.11 points per minute. He's a fine play. I think he can get you over 30 fantasy points, but at 7K, he's a little bit risky because we know the floor's a little bit low. But I mean, if he gets 40-plus points, I would not be surprised. So I do think he's a pretty solid mid-range play at this price tag. Steven Adams, I'm probably going to pass on Steven Adams. Clint Capella is a pretty solid defender. You could look at CJ McCollum here at 6,800. I like the price tag. He's below 7K. Although he's had a couple of clunker games recently, 29 points and 27 points. So it was a little bit risky. I think he's at 0.98 points per minute. But he's going to get 35 plus minutes in this game as long as it's competitive. I think he's a safe bet for over 30 fantasy points. Really good matchup versus Minnesota. They're bottom 5 versus guards. They're the fastest paced team in the NBA. So McCollum's fine as just a mid-range filler. There's just really a lot of good mid-range fillers. I shouldn't say good, but they're okay. Like McCollum, Wiggins, SGA, Chris Paul. These are all fine mid-range fillers. You also look at Melo too. I mean, it's a good matchup versus Minnesota. Just don't really like paying $6,600 for Melo. Derrick Rose, he's actually probably one of my favorite plays on this slate. $6,500. And like I said with Drummond, I liked him a lot a couple of days ago versus Cleveland, and nothing's really changed here. He had 39 points in 31 minutes versus Cleveland. Shot the ball 21 times, like the volume that he had. I think that's the most shots he's taken in a while, actually. At least in the last 10 games. So, like the shooting volume there that he had in the last game, and he had 43 points versus LA, which was a much tougher matchup. And he actually got the start in the second half, the past 2 games, I believe. And actually the past 2 games, he had a 38% usage rate too, which is by far the highest on the team. So when he's on the court, he is the guy, and I don't see why he can't do it again here. Kennard's out, Markieff's out, and Blake's out. And when they're all out, he's got a 35.1% usage rate, 1.3 points per minute, which is great. Elite matchup versus Cleveland, second worst defensive team overall, and 20th versus point guard. So Derrick Rose, I think he's an excellent play on this slate. Definitely a really solid GPP play, but I'd play him in cash as well. So like Derrick Rose quite a bit, despite him being a little expensive. Honestly, I think he's got 40-plus point upside, in my opinion, versus Cleveland. Gorgie Deng, as long as Karl-Anthony Towns is out, you could look his way. It's just whenever I play him, he sucks. Like, I didn't play him versus Memphis, but I didn't play him versus Cleveland. I played him versus Golden State. Played him versus Milwaukee. He sucked in those games. Didn't play him versus Brooklyn, 48. Played him versus Cleveland, 25. And then didn't play him versus Sacramento, 48. It's just how it goes sometimes. But the numbers would suggest he should be good, because without Towns on the court, he's like at 1.2 points per minute. Although he is losing some minutes to Naz Reid, who is actually playing pretty well recently. So we could look Gorgie Deng's way. It's just a mid-range filler. Portland is bottom 3 versus center, so it's a really good matchup. But he's just a hard guy to trust, in my opinion. But we know the guy's got a pretty high ceiling. He's shown it multiple times this season. He's just not a guy I really like to trust. Let's see. Dennis Schroeder, 6,100. He's fine. I don't mind him at 6,100. He's actually a really good price. He's much lower price than Chris Paul and SGA. And honestly, he's not been as good, but he's a safe bet for close to 30 fantasy points, and he's playing, over 30 minutes per game. And off the bench, he's got a 27.8% usage rate, been about a point per minute guy this season. He's going to get over 30 minutes. Good matchup versus Houston, nice fast-paced matchup. I actually don't mind Schroeder at 6,100. He should grade out as a pretty solid point per dollar option on this slate. I think he can get you over 30 fantasy points. Sexton, he's okay, but not a lot of interest. Covington, again, some of these Minnesota mid-range guys are fine, but it hurts that Wiggins is back, especially for a guy like Covington. Oh, let's see. Not a lot of... really, I don't like any of these guys, to be honest. Christian Wood's okay, but I don't love it. So I guess we could talk about... Okay, so I'll be honest, I don't know how to say this guy's name. Maybe, is it Svi? That sounds right. C-V? I'm not sure. But he is a good play on today's slate. So... Look, there's not a lot of value, but we're going to have to find some value somewhere. And I honestly think this might be one of our best options. He's been getting 30-plus minutes pretty much every single night. He only had 29 versus the Clippers. I think he got a little bit out of hand, though. But other than that, he's been getting pretty much 30-plus minutes a game. And he's been a safe bet for 20-plus fantasy points for the most part. 24, 24, 22, 20, 22. Really bad game for San Antonio. Only played 14 minutes, though. That was a blowout. Only had 7 fantasy points. But then 26, 23. I actually think he's a really solid play at 4,200 versus Cleveland, one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, bottom 5 versus his position. And if he's gonna get 30-plus minutes here, he's at 0.72 points per minute on the season, which isn't great, but he's also only 4,200, and the matchup's just fantastic. So, honestly, I think we get 20-plus points out of... I'm not sure how to say his name. I apologize. But if someone wants to let me know in the comments, go ahead. But I do think he's a really good value option on this slate. Relative. I would, in general, if this is a big slate, I wouldn't really be targeting him, but it's a small slate, so we don't have many options to go to. Then I have one more value play, and that could be Kent Bazemore here, and he's at 3,800 if I remember correctly. 3,600, so even better. But it's a really good matchup versus Minnesota. It's the fastest-paced team in the NBA. Both teams are not that great defensively. Now, he's going to get the minutes. He's going to probably get us 30-plus minutes for the most part. But the problem is, we'll be lucky if he breaks 20 points. He's pretty much been stuck in this 15 to 18 point range for a while now. 0.71 points per minute. It's a really good matchup. If he can squeak out 20 points, we'll take it at 3,600. But again, there's not a lot of value on this slate, so we're kind of just hoping for the best with a couple of these guys. I'm actually not sure how much Naz Reid is. So he's 3,400. Let's see. Past 2 games, he's only had 11 minutes. But that's with Andrew Wiggins being back. He's still been good, though. He's actually, when he's on the court, he performs pretty well. He's got a 25% usage rate, and he's been very good on a point per minute basis. I think he's at 1.26 points per minute. Problem is he's losing some minutes with Andrew Wiggins being back, but if Gorgie Deng's not playing well, they could extend his run, and he's actually not been too bad. So you could look his way if he just has a pure pump play. Not in love with it because the minutes have come down recently the past 2 games, but when he's on the court, he's honestly pretty productive, so I wouldn't hate looking his way. Good matchup versus Portland, but that's pretty much going to be it for this video, guys. I'm sorry this is not a great slate, in my opinion. Not a lot of great plays, but hopefully this was of some help. I know this video is a lot shorter. It's only 14 minutes as of right now. Usually we're like at 25 plus minutes, but small slate, so we can only do what we can do. I'll leave you guys with that. Hope this video was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really appreciate it. And also follow me on Twitter at Pennell 16. And I'll see you guys in the next video.